Welcome to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, here to share some amazing conversations. We're talking business, health, making and saving money, or starting something epic. Think of this as your go-to spot for stories that do a lot more than just kill time. They spark ideas, give you a boost, and perhaps even change the way you look at the world. I'm pulling in the experts, the thinkers, the doers, and the dreamers. We're about to dive into stories that open doors and ideas that light up your brain. Here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me today is my guest, Monica Kaufman. How are you today, Monica?
I am well. How are you?
I am doing well myself. Thank you so much for joining us today. I cannot wait for the listeners to learn more from you. Just to share a little bit about you, Monica, you are a certified financial planner and a fiduciary, and you're going to talk about what that means. But really, we're going to dive into money as a tool, money management, money mindset, like financial planning. And so, again, thank you for joining us to share this important information. I would love to have you share, Monica, how this journey happened for you. Like, what led you down this path? You are now working with Harmony Asset Management, and you've created a new program that's Harmony Wealth Academy. And so tell us how this all came to be.
Okay, so a couple of things happened. Many years ago, my husband was diagnosed with severe depression, and I had an opportunity to really sit back and think. I was a stay-at-home mom with 2 kids, and I had worked in economic research, and I hated it because I wasn't working with people. I wasn't solving anything that really mattered. So I wound up going into financial advisory, and I saw something that surprised me. There's a book called The Millionaire Next Door. And have you heard of that? And I found out with 2 different referrals that came in that it was real, that the people who have money at the end of the day use money as a tool, and they are extraordinarily intentional with it. The other thing that I found is that it's not necessarily the people with the highest degrees or formal education. It's the people who make the decision to learn to use the system who get to where they want to go. And I saw that over and over and over again. And then COVID hit. I was here in Dallas, and I saw so many people with very, very high incomes make choices that did not serve their best interest for the future. They didn't get to where they wanted to go. And it was because of a emotional connection to money that wasn't healthy. And it was also a lack of understanding of how the system worked. And so that's why I joined Harmony with the intent of creating this program. And that's why I'm here now.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's always so fascinating to me to hear the stories and journeys of how people get to where they are and, what kind of transpired to really change things for them and like launch this kind of creative idea of solutions that you can provide for people and ways that you can help others. And so that sounds exactly like what you've done here by creating this. And so let's dive into this kind of complex topic, but let's start with this big one. I know a lot of people are concerned about planning for retirement.
Right.
That's a biggie, right? We are worried about what's going to happen after I can't work anymore or when I'm ready to not work anymore.
Right.
And so what if you feel like maybe I've waited too long, I'm starting too late, kind of these thoughts that we sometimes have as we're thinking about our retirement. What do you want to share on that?
Okay, I have seen people, and in fact, excuse me, my first year at Merrill, I was allowed to sit in with an experienced advisor. And he had a couple come in that discovered in their 50s that they were in debt. They had paid for their kids' school. They had a house. The wife was not working, and they needed to make a course correction. And what they did was she went back to work. They made a bunch of adjustments. They paid off the debt very quickly. And they turned around 12, 13 years later with enough money put aside because everything one of them earned got put away for the future. And he increased his income, his saving and investing. And because of that, they were okay. It's not too late to start. It's harder, but it can be done. And the biggest thing is you have to make that decision. And then you have to make the decision to figure out where emotionally you're getting in your own way, because you can't go anywhere your mind hasn't gone before. So I mentioned, for example, my husband's depression. When he was first diagnosed, he was introduced to something called cognitive behavioral therapy. And the idea behind that is you shift how you think, that shifts how you feel, which then shifts how you act. So you don't necessarily have to have depression or diagnosis, but if you can use that same framework and start thinking along that way and shifting how you think about it and accept it as a tool, you then decide how you want to use your tools. And then you give yourself permission, once you start learning the system, to start moving along that way. And so that's really how, I guess what I would say is I've cooperated with everything that's happened in the past. If you cooperate with the arc, you can see the development in the process. And I want people to know this is a system they can master. This is something they can do. They have to decide that they can do it, they want to do it, they deserve to do it. And then it becomes a lot easier to just align their actions with it.
Yeah. Great stuff there, Monica, for sure. Aligning their actions to make it happen.
Mhm.
I think, yeah, it's important to recognize what has happened in the past and maybe the choices that you made, but the difference is gonna be when you kind of flip that switch or
Right.
twist that and then start taking action toward the changes you wanna make so you can get to where you wanna go. That's a big piece of it. So how then can we look at what our values are, what the lifestyle we wanna live, and begin to make that change and course correct?
So it starts with the mindset first, and you really have to start and think about your relationship with money. So there are some people who will turn around and say, what were the values that you received when you were younger? Did you get the message that you could build wealth? It starts with basically some basic definitions. What does financial independence or freedom look like? It means that work becomes optional. So if you want to work, you can, but you don't have to. And conversely, if you don't take ownership of this, somebody else is going to make that decision for you, or something else is going to make that. But really, it starts with that independence thing. And then what I do with people is I work with them and I use sort of the physical fitness framework. So it starts with, let's say, function. The different parts of your financial life need to be working. It gets to health when everything works well together. And then you get to fitness when you're able to carry the load. And the load also includes funding your goals. A lot of people forget that piece. You have to fund the goals. Once you start funding the goals, once you get to enough wealth underneath you that you can carry more than your goals, that's when you hit a performance level. So you can see that in physical fitness, and that's the first way we experience life. And then I want you to translate that into financial fitness. And the reality is, if you use that framework, it'll work for all the areas of your life. So it's really giving yourself permission in a real sense to succeed. But people have to understand that income is not wealth. And that's a shift for a lot of people, especially a lot of people who are high earners who think I can just do this forever. And then one day, some of them can. Some of them do it until the day they die in their sleep. And that's a blessing if that's what they want. Some of them can't do that. And so the goal is to have enough wealth underneath you that pays you, whether you work or whether you don't, so that you don't have to. What I want people to do too, and we use these different tools within the program. We use a lot of psychological tools that are built on cognitive theory. But one of the things we do that's most powerful is I want people to write a future self vision. Okay. And that future self vision is them living their lives, managing their money, but also managing the lives, who's with them, what does it look like? What does it feel like? What are the smells? What are the colors? What are the sounds? And I want them to do that. We then use that as a system and a framework. They write that out, they record that into their phone, and I want them to listen to that before they go to sleep, and I want them to listen to that when they get up in the morning. Okay, so I want them to start programming that. I want them to see themselves as the person who proactively manages their money and all that that means, that they build their life around this. They're intentional towards building a future they want to live. And then what we do is we're using that to reprogram the mind. If you identify as that subconsciously, your behaviors will shift a little bit easier. It becomes easier to get there.
Yeah, excellent stuff, Monica. Thank you for that. I love, first of all, this idea of the physical fitness kind of framework and how that can really translate to lots of other areas of your life,
Right.
including financial. And what you just shared, that example of writing down and then voice recording these goals, the things that are important to you, how you want to be as, whatever your future self is, so that you're replaying that twice a day and your brain is like really getting into that, and it changes who you are, right? When you're
Right.
listening to that over and over again, it,
People
it makes a shift.
It does, and I don't know, have you ever used affirmations in your own life?
Mhm.
Okay. So some people have imposter syndrome. I'll admit that I have it, okay, and it's a byproduct of my childhood, and there's a lot of research on that. So affirmations have to be written in such a way to really work. You can't leave room for doubt because your mind is going to go towards that safe spot. So, "Oh, I might be able to not have to do it, so I don't have to do it." You have to write it with an absolute conviction that it will happen and that it is happening. But the other thing is for people like me, when you first start with an affirmation, sometimes that can play in a very harsh way inside my head. And so there's a shift you can make. Talk to yourself the way you would talk to others, the way you would coach somebody else. And what happens when I do that is I realize I would never talk to somebody else the way sometimes I talk to myself. It's much kinder and it lands the right way and it's gentler and it works. So we use these tools to make it easier for you to actually achieve the results you want. The other thing that we do is we recognize something. Have you ever heard the saying that it takes 28 days to create a habit or
Yes.
21 days?
Yes.
That can be true, but it depends on how deep-seated and deep-rooted that habit is and how entrenched it is. The reality is, and people need to give themselves a little bit of grace with this, you've inherited and acclimated to a whole bunch of assumptions about money and wealth and lifestyle and certain cultural things. You've inherited them throughout your life. You've absorbed them. You've acclimated to them. You are not going to change all of those in 21 days. You need to give yourself time. And so, one of the things I really want people to do is I want them to step back. I want them to not be pitched. I don't want them, unless the thing blows up, unless something is on fire and you desperately need help, I want people to step back and really give themselves time and give themselves a break from the pressure of hearing, oh, you need to do this or you want to do this, and give themselves time to shift. The other thing that I want them to do is, and we do this very early, we start with the mindset in the program and we work on what we know happens to be within the mindset of the people who do achieve financial independence and who do achieve that performance level. We then shift, and we also, at the same time, as we build up what I call defensive systems. We use the system as it is, and they learn how to build those defensive systems and shields. So the idea is if you get knocked down, you get right back up. If you get knocked down. So we're building in resilience. The other piece is as they start to acclimate to the mindset, we're going to start tackling what I call adversity quotient. Have you ever heard the phrase?
No.
Okay, it's the ability to take on a challenge or the ability to face something stressful. Okay. And the more you do that, the more you take on those challenges and achieve them, the more you can take on. So I want people to develop that and take on some of those stress points and start actually building out what they want. So we build that in a very supportive environment, but we start with a foundation that supports them emotionally and then understanding the system, and then they move forward. So it's designed to actually make things comfortable. I want them comfortable in the system and uncomfortable not taking responsibility for it.
Yeah, good stuff. Thank you for sharing that. I hadn't heard the term before, but it's that kind of the concept of that resilience of it's like weight training, right? So if we're going to
Mhm.
use physical fitness as an example,
Yep.
our muscles take time to build, and this is kind of the same idea, right?
Right.
Where we face a little bit of challenge, and then when we can overcome that challenge, we're building that resilience, and we can get over the adversities that come, because they will,
Right.
but it
The
gives us
end
a chance to build that.
so the end result, just so that you know, have you ever heard of the psychological construct called grit?
Yeah.
Okay. Gratitude, resilience, instincts, and tenacity. So we build out the entire framework is based on grit. So you start with gratitude for what you have, and you start with gratitude for what you've learned and what you've done and what you can do. You shift, you build the resilience, And then you start building the instincts and the tenacity so that you can hang on. And the idea is when you have grit, you realize that stress and those challenges, that resistance actually does make you stronger financially. So you can take on risk intentionally. That's another thing. People are so afraid of risk. Risk is the chance that something could go wrong. Okay, but what about the chance that something can go right? If you're intelligent, you understand, and you're prepared, you're able and comfortable making those decisions.
Yeah. Good stuff. Again, thank you, Monica, for that. I want to touch back on that you shared earlier about our family history and the things that
Mhm.
we grew up with, and how important it is to remember that we may not have been taught good money habits, or we may have been taught that, money is difficult and you're never going to have enough. And,
Mhm.
whatever stories we grew up with, give ourselves some time to recognize that and, begin to maybe let some of that go so that we
Mhm.
can retrain our mind. And again, I think it's just, a fabulous reiteration of something that many of us have recognized, but maybe haven't quite gotten over. And so it's possible to do that. You've just got to build the muscle. And your
Right.
point about it takes more than 21 days. Absolutely. After 21 days, you're not gonna be like, "I've got it now." You're gonna have some stumbles, and you're gonna have to keep going. It could take you 6 months. It could take you a year.
Right.
Whatever the case is, depending on your, financial situation at the time, you've gotta recognize what you're facing and
Right.
the decisions you're gonna have to make going from there. So, great stuff.
Well, thank you. And I think what people need to understand is that it's nobody's fault that we're at a place where 80% of the population technically doesn't know how to use the financial system to their advantage. And the industry knows that. Financial advisors may have the capacity and bandwidth to work on this, but most don't. And most are not compensated or sometimes even allowed to get into some of this stuff. So, really, truly, the idea is to not just focus on the investments, it's to focus on that basic foundation. And it's one of those things when we talk about a fiduciary, it means I have to put you first. Okay. As a CFP, I have to. As part of the type of firm that I'm in, we have to put you first. I have to tell you the truth. I have to do that. But in the program, we take it and we split it. So advisory, when we're talking about advising you on asset management and managing the investments and doing the financial planning, where I walk you through what the options are and we talk about what to do, that's on one side. This is education and empowerment. So it's a break from being sold anything else. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm showing you how to use the system for yourself. I want you in charge of your financial future. And that's
Mm.
the idea behind it. And you have to give yourself time. And also, like, I'll give you a silly example. I realized this. When I was a kid, my parents got divorced when I was 6. And my mother grew up, she was born at the tail end of the Depression, and her family got hit hard. And there wasn't enough food there. She got her first job between second and third grade. That's how she bought herself school clothes and school shoes. She really worked hard because it was all on her, and she knew that from a very early age. When my parents got divorced, all of that financial stress came crashing down on her. And one of the things that she would do is she didn't feel comfortable starting off on a new adventure or new something without a new outfit. And I inherited that. So when I start something new, I'm like, oh, do I have something that's new or, to wear? And I'm like, wait a second, do I need that? Is that really necessary? And it could be little things like that where you realize I really absorbed the financial messages that she received. And she received one of fear and worry, and it makes sense. And she built her life. She really did build her life. She really did achieve that financial success. But she went through a very hard time with it. And all of those lessons were things that I absorbed as a child. So it's okay to say, "Hey, I didn't learn this." The question is, where do you go from here? You don't have to stay in that position.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So important to recognize that we are worth learning, understanding the tools and things that are available
Right.
to us. And I love that that's really your key is teaching people how their money can work for them, not just being in debt all the time and working until they're last dying breath, which many people do by chance or just because they want to. But I think it's so important that we understand that these things can be used to our advantage.
And it can be done by regular people. I have seen people without advanced degrees who were, you would think that they didn't have the money that they had. That's the other thing of this. Wealth is self-confident and it whispers. And unless you're in a place that's a little bit flashy like LA or New York, it really doesn't flash. It really doesn't need to. And there's a certain confidence with knowing, I could afford to buy that, but I don't necessarily need to and want to. I'd rather buy an investment. I'd rather buy something that pays me. And when you start valuing yourself, you start thinking, hey, what do I need to build out the life I want? That's something else. I want people to dream. I want people to dream and to know that at least financially, I can't promise them success in certain things, but what I want them to know is that they can build out the retirement they want. They can build out these things. And it's a decision to do it and to learn what is necessary to do it. I mean, like when you think about it, we're talking over the internet. Do you remember the first time you used Zoom? Were you a little nervous?
Of course.
Right. Okay. But you mastered it. I mean, I remember the first time I had my first computer. Okay. I was a little excited and I was a little bit of a young jerk with it, but okay, fine. I learned how to master it. We all learn. I remember the first time driving. We all go through this. This can be done. There's no difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you're so right. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's dive into because we're talking around this idea of really financial independence, financial freedom.
Right.
So, what is your definition of financial freedom and how do we define it? How do we take steps to move us closer to what it is for us?
Okay. So, one of the things that I've heard, one of my former clients referred to financial independence, or he starts off with understanding what the nut is. What is the monthly expense that he had to pay, he and his wife had to pay? Whatever your phrase is, it's understanding what those expenses are, where you're spending your money, and where it's going. Okay. And the truth is, people think that in retirement, they're going to spend less. No, they actually may spend more. And then when it gets to healthcare, they will spend more, or long-term care, they will spend more. So the question is, where am I now? What am I spending on my expenses? And where is the money going? And sometimes that brings up a lot of anxiety. Nobody wants to look at the numbers. Nobody wants to do it. I had an accountant, my accountant challenged me. He said, where are your expenses in your business? And I wound up having to take the time to go through my statements and outlined out every single expense that I have to run my business. And that's an educational process, but I don't want to make that this hard and I don't want the stress to affect people. So one of the first things we do is we have them, if their bank actually shows them by category where they're spending money, we want them to flip that switch and look at it. And then the question is, did you realize you were spending that much money in that category? Where do you have the ability to make changes that you would be comfortable with? So that's one of the things that we can do. If their bank does not have that turned on or they have that capability, most of them do, but if they don't, it's not a problem. We give them access to our financial planning software, which is eMoney. And we want them to hook up onto the system their checking accounts and anything they use to pay bills or spend on. Because we want them to see after a period of 1 to 2 months where it's going. And the question is, again, are you surprised by the categories? Are you surprised by how much you're spending? Where can you make shifts? What shifts are you comfortable with? It's a lot easier when they can see it and they don't have to diagram it. So we make that easy and comfortable for them. And then we look at that and we say, okay, once we've developed the financial defenses and they start thinking along those lines, and once they start having the mindset, we think about how do we resolve debt? How do we get rid of the debt? And then how do we build up the emergency fund? And the emergency fund is cash on hand. It's not invested in anything that is not like a money market, immediate liquidity. Cash on hand for them in the event that something happens and they're not able to work. Or there's an emergency, whatever it is. You need to replace an HVAC unit. You need to do something. All of a sudden, your car is demolished. How do you buy the new car? What I want them to do is to understand it used to be the rule of thumb that it'd be anywhere from 3 to 6 months. That rule of thumb is a framework, it's a start. Sometimes you might want it to be bigger than that. And let me give you an example. As you approach retirement, let's say you're planning to retire in 5 years or 3 years. I want you to look at how much you have in cash on hand, and I want you to increase it. Why? Because if you're planning on retiring based on what you have in retirement accounts, or if you have a pension and you're lucky, I want you to not have to touch that before you're ready to. And if something happens, if there's cash available, that works. When I teach how to use the retirement system, I work really hard with clients to get as much as they can afford to get into the Roth IRA account. Why? Because a couple of things in retirement. When we pull from the accounts, yes, we have to take certain minimums out once they reach a certain age. But even before that, if they want to spend money, we want to manage where the money's coming from for taxes. So if we can keep the withdrawals to hit the need without taking them into the next bracket, that makes it easier for their money to last longer. So they'll learn how to work with the systems. They'll learn how to turn these things on. And it's really just about designing that, looking at the system and saying what works for me, what doesn't. One of the things I'll work with people on is say, okay, let's say you have a health situation, or let's say you're married and one of the two has health issues and pre-existing conditions. We'll look at, do you need long-term care? Is that realistic? And what's the best option? Straight up long-term care can be very expensive. However, there are alternatives. And one of the things I'll say to people is if you can afford to pay the deductible on your insurance and your plan is HSA eligible, by putting money there, what that does is it buffers you, not just for your immediate deductible or out of pocket. I want them to understand that, but you can use that in retirement to pay for long-term care. And there have been times that I've had people set that up so that they get to a point where they have 2-3 years worth of long-term care expenses sequestered, or they will once the time they retire. Again, it's about figuring out how to make the system work. What's the situation and personalize it. So we work with that, and we work with giving you guys the structure. And then at the end of that, we teach the investments. What do these look like? How do these work? And that's literally the first 5 months of the program. The next part of the program takes it up further on the psychological point, but also works for people who have higher incomes to expose them so that they understand what some of those vehicles are and further develop that out. Does that help?
It does, it does, and you mentioned quite a few different tools in there,
Right.
the HSA, the Roth IRA, and did you mention a pension? And, you know, obviously, many of us know about 401ks, not that
Right.
our company necessarily provides that, but we've probably heard of it. But these are things that if we begin to understand how they
Right.
work and how they can work for us, it
Mhm.
makes a difference for our future life. And I had never heard of using the HSA for that kind of long-term care planning as an
Right.
option. So just even something for me that's new, I
Okay.
had never heard of before. So thank you for that. And I want to just touch back on what you were sharing earlier in this is that bank accounts often will have, like you said, it'll show you exactly how much you're spending on different categories and
Right.
what an easy way to understand where your money's going. A lot of
Right.
times we think, I've got to put it in an Excel sheet. I have to look in all these places. I don't have time for that.
Right.
So if your bank has that option, what a quick and easy way for you to see where your money's going. And you can
Right.
make a quick choice right there about if there's shifts you want to make, things you want to cut out
Right.
because it's just, you really don't need it.
And I think that that's really necessary. The next thing that I also think is that a lot of your banks will offer the ability to do credit monitoring. And the credit score is a reflection of the risk of lending money to you. Risk is just a tool. It tells you something, okay? The chance that something could go wrong. So one of the things that I will do with people is I will say, we'll talk about risk. We'll talk about risk tolerance. Psychologists will say that your ability to tolerate risk is determined round about the time you're about 6 years old. That's not necessarily true. When I talk to a client, I talk to them and I want to find out what's going on with them and I listen to them. It's not just because I like my clients. I have a professional reason. I want to know, is there something going on where I have to take risk off the table? I want to know if I'm hearing something that gives me a clue that maybe they could take on more risk. And I can't ever take someone out beyond their risk tolerance that they express to me. So even though they may have a goal, I remember training a new advisor many years ago. And he said, well, we did the financial planning, and unless they take on more risk, they're not going to hit their goals. The answer is you can't do that. You cannot take them out beyond their risk tolerance. So they have to change the goal. If that means they can't retire at 65 or 67, maybe that means they have to retire at 70 and hope that their health and whatever holds up. It's really an important piece of the puzzle. And I never want to hear another person come in and say, I want a no risk portfolio. There is no such thing. There's low risk and there's degrees of risk. But the other piece you need to understand is that there are some things I can't control, like, for example, risk to the system or inflation. So these are things that affect us. And everybody's gone through inflation recently. It's been miserable and nobody likes it. But this is one of the biggest risks you have in retirement. Are your investments keeping up with your needs and the inflation and the tax situation with it?
Yeah. Yeah, great point, Monica. Again, this is such great information for sure. And what came to mind for me when you were talking about the risk, and you can't push anybody beyond where their comfort level is, but there's other levers you can kind of
Right.
adjust, right? You can look at, do you have the option to change jobs, or can a spouse go back to work? Is there some way you can increase your income?
Right.
If you can't tolerate higher risk, is there other things? Can you reduce your spending? It's like
Right.
there's these kind of levers that you can adjust as you go
Right.
to reach your goal, or change your goal, or change the age that you retire. All of those things can be shifted depending on what you're able to do.
Right. And that's the part of financial planning. You asked me what that is. That is really taking a look at the financial resources and assessing if they're enough and under what conditions they should be handled to hit the goal that the client expresses. Is that realistic? Is it not realistic? And it's a dialogue. So a lot of people, they go, "Oh, I'm just going to do the free financial plan the advisor has and put it away." Well, that may not help you because you're looking at different options and you need to be able to see how they affect you. And it's never carved into stone. You have to go back and address it and update. Okay.
Yeah.
And back onto the credit thing, one of the things that I want people to do is to look at that and face down that dragon, whatever that credit number is. And I want them to look at whatever is affecting them and to watch that and to guard and protect their identity. Many years ago, around 2006 or seven, my husband he went to see a doctor. I think it may have been an ER. He needed medical care. He was working in New York at the time, and we were living in Philadelphia. And he was up there, and somehow or other, his ID got hijacked. And it was his driver's license, social security number, all of that. And it got hijacked. And it took many years to get through that. There is nobody I wish that on. I don't care how much I may not like somebody. There's nobody I wish that on. I've had clients go through it, and it is not fun. And it's sort of like, look, your identity is critical. Let's talk about ways you can manage your identity. You need to protect it. And so that means for every electronic device, for every time we're dealing with this, I need you to think about that because I can't control that. You can control what you do and watch how you deal with that. So it's important, manage it. It's a real asset. You're building out your life. If you have great credit, protect it. Even if you don't have great credit yet, it'll be harder to fix if you don't protect it. So I just want you to protect what you're building. I want you to
Yes.
value yourself enough to take proactive steps.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And especially because we know, like, these scams, and oh my gosh, they're getting so sophisticated. We're getting text messages, we're getting emails. It's just all over the place, and it's so easy to fall victim to that. My mother, that's happened to her. It happened to me, surprisingly,
Yeah.
for our business, not communicating with one of the business partners, and it's like how much I know, and it happened to me. And
Right.
so it's like, it really is getting so sophisticated. So we have to be super diligent in protecting ourselves and So protecting our ID, getting our credit locked, going to the different credit
Right,
bureaus, making sure that's locked down. And not to get too far off topic, but this is an important thing for your financial health and well-being for your future, right?
right.
So let's talk about this then. What other things can we do to protect ourselves, our money, our future, all of that?
Well, if you're talking about your credit, I'll never forget listening to somebody who used to work for the NSA, and she was actually giving a presentation. And she talked about the fact that you don't realize that there are state actors who are out there doing identity theft. There's organized crime out there doing identity theft. These people are sophisticated and they know how we behave. So don't feel badly if you fall for it. Okay, learn from it. You are going to make mistakes. You're human. Pick yourself up and say, okay, I'm going to learn. I'm going to fix this. I'll do better. Okay. I know it's very tempting to get upset. I understand that. And I would be livid. I'm livid when somebody takes advantage of me or somebody else. It makes me so upset, but you can't stay in that for too long. And you have to give yourself permission to be human, but you learn from it. I would recommend that you go to the credit agencies and literally lock down new credit applications on your ID. That is the cheap and easy way to do it. If there's a nominal fee, I think one of them has a nominal fee that you can do where it'll report back out to you. That maybe if you have that in your budget, I'd like to see you do that. There are other options as well, LifeLock and some of the other firms. One of the things that I would recommend people do is look at their employer's benefits, because sometimes that's an easy way to get either a discount on that or to get that at, there may be an arrangement. I mean, the first time I bought LifeLock, it was through an employer and it was discounted considerably. I would have paid full price. It wasn't that much, but for me, it was just one of those things. Your employers, the larger employers, do know that this is a problem and they're aware. And what they usually do is they just negotiate a better rate. It doesn't cost them anything, but it works for you. The second thing that I will say to people is you have a 70% chance of having a disability event that affects your ability to work in your lifetime between 18 to 65, 66, according to the Social Security Administration. I've seen people have to do this. So what you have to do is think, if you have an employer that offers long-term disability or even short-term disability, if you have both, you want to sign up for that. And then I'm going to say something you're going to hate. You want to pay the premiums on that. If it's a group policy, it's going to be fairly cheap. Okay. Especially when you're young. I've seen policies that cost a whopping $4.21 for people. Okay. And the reason why I'm saying this is look, for the cost of, let's say, for an adult beverage every pay period, or maybe 2 or 3 adult beverages every pay period, you can replace on an after-tax basis your income. So let me explain why. So let's say you have I'm going to use round numbers. Let's say it's $100,000. If you can't work through no fault of your own and you need income, what happens is if you go on disability and let's say it covers 60%, instead of earning 100,000, you're earning 60,000. But if you pay the premium on it, you're not getting taxed on that 60,000. If you don't pay the premium, if your employer pays that for you, you get taxed on that. So how you pay for insurance determines its taxability or how it's subject to federal income tax. State tax is different, but subject to federal income tax when you take the proceeds. So I want to see people own their insurance or at least get it so that they're paying the premium. And that way, if something happens, they're okay. And I counseled recently a young lady in her early 20s. She had a really hard start in life, but she was working her tail off to better herself and she was succeeding. And unfortunately, she got very, very sick and she wound up not being able to work. She doesn't have family. She was adopted. And now it's really awful to think about how hard life is going to be. She may not make it. And, you don't want to live like that. And for the cost of deferring a Starbucks drink, an adult beverage, would you rather take that off the table? So that's one of those things that I watch people take off the table. The credit is the basic. The other thing that I would say is look at Britney Spears. Okay, super successful at one point, making a tremendous amount of money. She didn't have her documents in place. And had she had her documents in place, she could have had a trust set up. It wouldn't have been in the public eye. It wouldn't have been in the courts. And she could have determined who and what was done for her and on her behalf. And the way I look at it is this. When my son was 19, he had an accident while he was in college. Not a car accident, but while he was doing some personal training. And he wound up needing to go to the hospital. I didn't have a power of attorney on him. He was at the defiant stage, and I didn't have that. So I showed up, and thank God he was awake and conscious and able to say to the doctors, "That's my mom, talk to her," which was about all he was able to say at that point. He was just out of it. It gave me the authority to be in the room and to interface with the doctors on his behalf. Having those basic things set up so that you can actually take care of things or it can be done for you is critical. And it's one of those things that protects you. And that's where it really starts. We work on that at the beginning part of the program. It's the medical power of attorney. It's the general power of attorney. It's making those decisions. Who has the ability? Recent example, went to Colorado to spend time with family. My mother flew in. She is 86. She flew in 3 days after surgery. Don't ask. She was determined. Okay. And she showed up and she's all happy. But because she had surgery, she had a medical issue and we had to take her to the ER. And it was one of my brothers and I, we went, and he's a doctor. He was interfacing with the doctors. But she was awake and she said, "Talk to my son." She had the ability to do that. None of us had the written authority to do it. Okay. Make the decision or else the court makes it for you. And it's expensive and it's public and it may not be who you want and it may not be what you want. So it's one of those things where you have to look and say, okay, if something happens, or, another example, and I've heard about this from estate lawyers. If you have kids and you get into a car accident and you can't pick up your kids, who has the authority to pick them up from school or from daycare? And if you don't give somebody that written authority to do it, they may have to actually call the police, Child Protective Services, and then you've got another problem. It's one of those things where it's like, look, a simple document can make all the difference in the world. And if you take it, even if you're taking a form and you take it over to the bank to have it notarized, that may be better than nothing. So there are ways to get this done. And that's where it really starts. It's sort of like, start with you as a person. And let's use what your real personal risks are and then take it out from there. And we do it with baby steps. So, and the other piece that I would say, people think about estate planning and they think about it as a will. And there are so many other things that go up to the will. And I explained this to my mother. It's like, all right, so people think of the will and the death, but from, onset of illness or injury to death, 95% of the time, there's lots of time and steps in between. What do you want? What do you not want? And quite frankly, it's not carved into stone because we can change it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Monica, so much great information in there. Lots and lots of pieces. And I know the listeners are going to need to probably go back and listen to this again. But if they have questions, no. It's great though, because if somebody had never even heard of these ideas before of like medical directive, power of attorney, any of these things. And then also the point that you made about your children, if they're 18, 19, 20, 21, whatever, and you don't have a power of attorney, right. They haven't, written any kind of medical directive, you can't do anything for them. And right. It doesn't matter how many times you say, "I'm their mother," the medical people are going to say, "Oh, well, too bad."
Right. Well, they're supposed to say that. But yeah. And then the other piece that I was going to say about this is, let's say you've got a child and you're signing or co-signing for their loans. On some loans, if something happens to them, they're disabled. Unfortunately, they're no longer with us. That loan may be discharged. Some of the private ones, they won't be. You're on the hook. If they can't pay, you're on the hook. So when you look at your children and you do this, one of the things I would say to them is, look, I'm co-signing, but you need to have life insurance to cover this, okay? And you need to have disability insurance so that you can afford to pay your bills in the event something happens, because I'm still on the hook here, okay? And so it's one of those things where it's like, when you talk to your children about these things, what you're doing is you're teaching them the consequences. It's like, look, I need you to protect me because I'm helping you, okay? And that's part of the conversation. It's There's a dialogue that needs to happen, and sometimes it's not comfortable, but it's so much more uncomfortable if you don't do it. So I would love to help people. I'm happy to help people. I will have a link for you that you can have your people sign up for a consultation for me. We are running the Wealth Academy. We have one for adults, and then we also have a new one that's for what I call the launcher crowd. If you want your children to have these skills and to understand what they need, we have a program for them. And there's some benefits for that that's tailored directly for the young crowd so that they start off on the right foot and they have confidence. So I'll have those links, and there will be a discount code in there if they just put in your name. And I'm happy to help anybody. Just reach out to me. I'm happy to have a conversation.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I will for sure have you share how the listeners can reach out to you.
Mhm.
Um, but before we get to that, Monica, is there anything else that you think that the person who's listening really needs to know that you maybe haven't shared to this point? What would you like to say?
I think I just want to repeat that there's nothing in this system they can't learn, that it's not their fault they may not have learned it up until now, but they don't have to stay stuck. Today is the day where you can move. And here's the thing, there are lots of programs out there. My program is built on a certain type of approach, and it takes time and it gives you the time and support. But there are other people that there are other things that might work. I just want people to start. I want people to feel like they can take ownership of this and that they can reach it. It can be done. I've seen it. And so I just want to empower you to take that step and believe that you can. Because when you believe that you can and you say, okay, this is where I want to go, if you don't say that, you're not going to get there. Give yourself permission to do it. You cannot go where your mind has not gone before you.
Good, good. Really, Monica, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for the kind of reiteration of everything that we've been talking about. You can do it. Baby steps, start with a question.
Mhm.
What is the next thing I need to do from here? And keeping in mind the future goals and plans and dreams that you have so that
Right.
you can get there. Yeah,
Give
great
yourself
stuff.
permission to dream. I just want to see people give themselves permission to dream and then go after it. Thank you for this opportunity. I very much
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you so much for this knowledge and information. And so at this point, Monica, I love to have my guests share if there's books or podcasts or anything that they think would be helpful or beneficial for the listeners to check out. Is there any that you'd like to share?
there is one. I want them to go and get The Millionaire Mindset by Stanley. I want you to get that book or to get The Millionaire Next Door. It is very real. And he will walk through how people have done it, but it starts with giving yourself permission and then facing the reality and learning the skills. You're not expected to be perfect in anything here. It's progress over perfection.
Mhm.
And then the other thing that I want them to think about is Atomic Habits. And I think most people have heard of that book, but the reason why I want them to see that is that if you make small changes, it will compound over time into big results. So once you buy into that, it's a lot easier to accept that it can be done and it won't be like pulling nails.
Okay, tremendous recommendations for sure. Atomic Habits has been mentioned by so many guests
Right.
because it is an incredible book. The Millionaire Mindset, another really great one, and The Millionaire Next Door. Excellent recommendations for sure. So I'll detail those. And thank you for that. So, Monica, would you share now with the listeners how they can find you, ask you questions, follow along with the work you're doing? Are you
Okay.
on social media?
I'm not on social media as much. There's a little bit of a challenge with that, but they can reach me on, we have two different websites they can find me on. The Harmony Asset Management one, which is the parent organization, www.harmonyam.com, and then the harmonywealthacademy.com. They can reach me directly for the program. So we're here to ask questions, and I just would love to hear from you. And if there's something you'd like for somebody to discuss or to, additional information, put it down in the chat and let Desiree know.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And I will detail the information in the show notes. I think it's a great step. Just start going to the website. I'm sure there's contact us links in there.
Mhm.
People can ask questions and reach out and then find more about the program for your Harmony Wealth Academy. So I love that you're doing that for kids as well or teens so
Yeah.
they can begin to understand, all these tools that are available to them and developing that mindset of I can reach this goal, just like any other goal you set in your life. So tremendous stuff, Monica. Again, thank you for sharing all of this with us. It's been an honor to have you on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor to be here.
Well, we'll talk more soon.
Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. We appreciate your time and curiosity as we explore fascinating topics together. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to join us next week for another amazing episode. Remember, your journey of learning and growth is a continuous adventure, and we're thrilled to be part of it. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next week, stay curious and keep exploring those pockets of knowledge.